Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create your own padded hound collar. Now, one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, have I got any templates for the hound collars? And I can now say that yes, I do. So they are going to be available in 3 different lengths, and each length is available in 2 different widths to cover a range of dog sizes. Now, the sizes that I have chosen may not be the sizes that you like to use for your own hound collars, so there will be a custom templating service where you can choose everything from the length, the width, how many holes you want, how far apart you want, and you can create your own proper customized hound collar template, and there'll be links to both down in the description. So you're going to want to grab your template, and then you want to have a 3/4 inch buckle and D-ring, because that's the sizes that I have used on all of the templates. You can then set your strap cutter to the width of your template and cut your leather strip. Once you've got your strip of leather, you can then lay on your template, and I like to weigh mine down, and then you can draw around it, making sure that you add in the holes and the crew hole, as well as the stitching holes, which will be available on the patterns when they're released. Once you've drawn around it, you can then remove your template and start cutting this out. So I cut my leather down to a bit more of a more manageable size before I start cutting out, but it's up to you and whatever you find easiest. Once you've done the shaped areas, you can then cut the collar to length before cutting out the egg point on the point end. Now we've got that cut out, what we're going to do is number 1 edge our grain side of the main collar, and we're going to start from just above where the crew hole is. Once we've done the grain side, we can flip things over and we can start doing some edging on the flesh, and we're going to just edge the point end on this. We then want to skive 2 wedges to go either side of our D-ring, and then we can start staining and polishing. Now I am also putting a leather loop on mine, so I've already cut that out and I'm staining that at this stage. We also want to apply some Tolkanol, because it's easier to add this now than once we've finished, when the collar has all the padding on. And you can then rub that in for a nice polish. We can then use a heated crease and crease around our pieces. And you should now have your bits something like this. We are going to go on and continue prepping the collar. So we are going to put some tram lines on so we can punch our crew hole. And the crew hole that you're going to need is going to vary on the size of the buckle tongue on your chosen buckle. And you can punch that all the way through. Now, depending on the size of your buckle tongue and your chosen crew punch, you may need to use a number 6 edge tool and take out the back of the crew hole. For mine, this one sits really nice and snug within the crew hole without having to do that. So I'm going to leave it at that and then mark on as close as I can to the buckle where my stitch line is going to start, and then transfer that onto the other side with a set square. Now on the templates you have, these 3 marks have already been added into the template, so you're not going to need to add these, but I thought I would add them just in case. And once you have your points marked on, you can then use your dividers and draw a line between them, and then using a round object, draw on your point. You can then, with your chosen stitch marker, stitch mark all the way around your collar. Now we've done our stitch marking, we're going to skive the turn end down to nothing because this is going to be a padded collar. Now, if you're doing a non-padded collar, you want to skive the end down to half thickness. We can then measure out for our looping. Now, I like to do mine where I've wrapped it really tightly around the 2 layers, but you can do this however you'd like to do your own. And once you have the size of the loop that you need, you can cut that to size. Then we're going to start assembling the buckle end. So we want to make sure we put our D-ring on first because we can't put that on after we've got the buckle on. And then we're going to put our buckle on and we're going to tack in our loop. So we want to make sure that our loop is in the middle. So we're going to line that up with the center of the crew and draw a line with our nail on the edge so we know where to put this to. We can then put that in between the layers and using a tack, we can tack the loop in place. Once our loop is in, we can then get the first of our wedges and put that in behind it so it's nice and snug fitting to it. And again, we can then tack that in place. We can then move the D-ring up and squish the next one of our wedges in right behind that. We want to get that nice and tight there. And then again, tack that in. And we can now start to prepare our padding. So I'm using 6mm thick Plastazote for this, but you can use other foams such as neoprene. What I like to do is add 1/16 or 1.5mm onto the overall width of my collar, and then I cut a strip of the foam. Once you have your strip cut, you can then place your collar centrally on top of this, and we're going to use a biro pen to draw around both of the tapered ends. Now on the buckle end, we want it so that we have 1 stitch mark hanging over the edge of our foam. And with the pen, we're just going to draw around this. And that will add on the width we need when we cut the foam out to size on these ends. Now on the end that is facing the point, we don't need to pad all the way out. And what we're going to do is where our turn starts for the shaped stitching, we will put our foam up to there. Once you have your shape on, you can then even up your point end with a ruler, and then you can cut your foam out. Once your foam is cut out, we're going to want to taper the 2 ends because at the moment they're too wide to go onto our leather collar. So we're going to taper them, and then we're also going to skive them down as well. So for the padding leather, I'm using 0.8mm chrome town leather, and this one is specifically a baby buck nappa hide. And we're going to overcut that to our foam shape. And then we can glue the 2 pieces together. Now we want to make sure we put glue on both our foam and onto our leather. And once they have gone nice and tacky, we can glue the 2 together. Now to get the leather cut to size, first of all, what we're going to do is wrap this around our foam and draw on with a pen where it roughly meets the center of the leather. And we're going to do this all the way around. We want to make sure we also go around those tapered ends. And you should have something that looks a little bit like this. We can use a pair of scissors to mark around our shaped lines that we have just drawn on. Once it's cut to size, you can then apply some glue once again to the leather and the foam, making sure you get the glue on the sides of the foam so that the leather sticks to them nicely. Once tacky, we can then start to shape the leather around our foam. We want to make sure there aren't any baggy bits on the edges, so we want to start getting the edges stuck to the foam first, and then we can start turning the leather over and into the middle of the foam. Now, with a collar like this, it is likely that you may get wrinkles in certain areas, and that is absolutely fine so long as you push them in towards the center of the foam and they're not too close to the edge, because we don't want to see any folds. And remembering to get those tapers in nice and tight around the foam on the two ends. Now, adding the leather is going to make our little foam padding bit a little too big, so we're now going to need to cut that down. Now, for mine, I like to use a pair of scissors, and I hold this at an angle and trim at the ends. And if you can get it straight first time, that is quite helpful, but it doesn't matter if you need to go over it a couple of times. You just want to make sure you don't cut too far into the foam. And I generally start on the end where my buckle is, and we want to make sure that's going to fit in nicely and between the width of our leather. And then we can measure it out, and then we can cut the other end down as well. And you can see here where the foam is inside my leather, so I'm going to cut about there. And once your foam padding is cut to size, you can then put some glue on this. Now, on the padding side, we want to make sure that we're keeping our glue within the center and we're not getting too close to the edges. And then you can glue on the whole of the back of the collar. And when tacking, you can then attach the two together, making sure that the buckle end is in line with the loop, because we're going to have one stitch over the edge of it. And you want to make sure your foam is also nice and even, and if need to, you can remove bits of it and put them back on. We can now start to do our stitching. So we will start with one back stitch, and our first stitch is going to go through the first part of our loop and into our foam, and then go over towards the buckle just to lock that foam down. We're then going to do one stitch over the edge just to cinch in the leather around this buckle turn. And then we're going to start stitching towards ourselves. And when you get close to the tacks, you can remove these with a pair of pliers and continue stitching. And we're going to stitch right up until we get as close to the D-ring as possible. When you do get as close to the D-ring as you can, what we're going to do is do one long stitch over the D-ring by skipping out one stitch mark. We are then going to do a back stitch. And then continue stitching towards us. Now, this is just the way that I like to do my collars. If you wanted to, you could actually mark yours out so that there is a gap here. That is totally up to you. And you are going to need to use more than one length of thread for your collar. So what I do is use a full arm span because that is the most manageable amount of thread that you can use. And when needed, do 1.5 back stitches before starting a fresh new thread. And you won't need to actually do a back stitch on your new thread because all that it's doing is holding the padding onto the collar. When you get to the buckle end of your collar on the other side, what we're going to do is pre-awl the last 4 stitch marks. Once we've done that, we can then put our loop in. And the reason we do this is because it's now easier to awl through, because what we're just awling through is the thickness of the loop and not both full thicknesses of leather either side of it. You want to make sure your loop is nice and straight, and then you can start awling through and finish stitching your collar. And you're going to need to move the loop around so you can get to your original holes that you awled through. And again, when it comes to loop placement, that is totally up to you. I like to have my loop as close to the buckle as possible because that is how I was taught and that's what my personal preference is. But there's no reason why you can't move this back a bit should you find that easier or if that is to your design tastes. When you've finished stitching your loop in, we're going to do 1 stitch over the edge to match our original side. And then we will do 1.5 back stitches. Now when it comes to doing your back stitches through the loop, it can get a bit tricky to pull the needle out. So if you need to, and if this counts with anywhere, if you need to use some pliers to pull your needles out, that is absolutely fine. But you want to make sure you pull them out straight and don't use the side of the pliers. You want to use them so your needle goes straight into the mouth of them, because that way you're not going to get bent needles. You can then trim your threads off and we can now start doing our finishing touches. So I like to block the loop on my collar, and with using lighter leather like what I have for this video, I put a little piece of card in the same width as the collar so that my loop stick won't transfer any dirt. I'm then going to restain around my turn area. And then using a bone folder, I'm going to polish the edges and try my best to make it look like one thickness of leather. Once we've done that, we can then do our creasing. Now, as I said, I like to block my loop with a loop stick, and so I'm going to keep that in whilst I recrease around the loop so it doesn't squish down and it gives me a nice solid surface to do that on. We can then crease around the back side of the turn before creasing all the way around the front. You can see here why I put that card in to protect my leather. We can then punch the holes in our point end, and then we have completed our collar. So thank you very much for watching this video. Once again, links to the custom hound collar templating service and the hound collar templates that I've created will be in the description below, along with the leather that I have used in this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please click the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos and tutorials, and I shall see you in the next video.